Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Captive Audience and welcome to another wonderful Wednesday with your hosts, Don Anderson and Leslie Schneider. What say you, Leslie?
Hello, everyone. It's Wednesday hump day. Let's jump. Let's get
It's
in.
hump day, it's jump day. Let's hop to it. Well, let's just go right to it because when you live in the great Northwest, the West Coast is full of nut jobs. It used to be that Cal Berkeley was the reigning title. And then Seattle jumped into the fray, and then Portland jumped into the fray, and then the other cities in California. Of course, you can't leave LA and San Diego out of the mix. But I think right now we got to give the reigning West Coast title for the time being to the mayor of Seattle. Wait till you hear about this. New York City, eat your heart out. We got something that is serious competition for you. So I'm going to put this in the chat line so you can read it for yourself, and we're going to let her rip. So, bottom line, this is the new mayor of Seattle, just elected. She's never held a job. She's never taken care of herself. Here's a 43-year-old woman living on her parents' dime. I'm not kidding you. She collects regular checks from her parents to make ends meet. But with the expertise she's gained from living off the couch, she's now in charge of telling an entire city what to do. No experience as an employee, no experience as a business owner, no experience doing anything except quote unquote community organizing. You know what happened the last time we elected an executive to be a community organizer? Need I tell you more? So, what problems beset the Emerald City, what we used to once call the Emerald City, the city of Seattle? Emerald no more. So, the most recent problem is grocery stores are closing due to crime and theft. Kind of the same problem that happened in San Francisco, Los Angeles, Portland, all the other cities that go leftist and refuse to enforce crime. So, in this interview, and I sent you all the link to this, the employees are demonstrating a spectacular level of economic ignorance. I mean, they're interviewing these people, and the accusations from the store employees in the neighborhood and the mayor are the follows: the store should stay open for loyalty. The store is only interested in profits. The store should stay open even though it's losing money. The only thing these people care about is an express hatred of companies that deliver food to their neighborhoods. So their solution, wait till you hear this, only a Marxist can come up with this. We should force the stores to stay open. She's looking to pass laws that fine stores if they close in order to force them to stay open. You cannot make this up. So bottom line, you don't have a right to someone else's labor. If there is no profit, there is no store. What part of this don't these people get? But these are lessons you learn when you're laying up on your mom and dad's couch mooching off someone else. They have completely avoid discussing the obvious problem. There's no profit because there's excessive crime. If you take care of the crime, the stores can make money, and you don't wind up with a food desert. But no, they don't want to do that. They think the solution is to force stores to open by finding stores that leave. Unbelievable. They're avoiding the obvious solution, which is the enforcement of crime. One last thing, unless I'll let you hop in here. I always love one of my favorite German philosophers, Friedrich Hegel, whose statement, history teaches us that man learns nothing from history. These fools know nothing of Venezuela, Cuba, Soviet Union, China, North Korea, East Germany, South Africa, Yugoslavia, Romania, wherever, whenever, and however socialism is tried, it's an abysmal failure. Here's what I'm thinking. Is it because they're stupid? Or is it because they lack the courage to confront the fact that the vast majority of this theft is being done by minorities? And this is a constituency that they must have as voters. So noodle that around for a bit. So I will stop and turn over the floor to you. What say you, Leslie?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned Germany because I've been following a couple things. So I lived in Germany for a short period of time and have several friends still there. And so whenever I see German news, I kind of perk up. And I saw that there are German uh, Christmas markets that are, it's traditional Christmas market. They do these outdoor Christmas markets in Germany. They're beautiful and well attended. They're canceling them all over Germany because the Muslims are protesting. The Muslims are saying that this is against their faith and they're offended that people are gathering and celebrating the Christian faith and are having a market. It's not like they're having a service, but it's something. Again, it's just something that they can do to be disruptive,
Hmm.
and to terrorize people and force them to shut down and shut up. So there was a timeline that was shared. Well, and then this one specific market, which was it in Wiesn? Anyway, they had to provide it was costing so much to provide security, these barricades so that people wouldn't drive through, and security personnel, and the cost of security become to provide a safe environment, because you have these terrorists who are trying to get in and wreak havoc.
Hmm.
So in anticipation of needing all that security, rather than the city law enforcement making some rules or enforcing the rules, they just literally canceled the markets. So back in 2024, in Magdeburg, so these are some of the threats that German markets have faced. A Saudi doctor plowed his BMW through a Christmas market at 30 miles an hour, leaving 6 dead and 338 wounded. A year before, in another German town, authorities uncovered a plot by 2 radicalized teenagers, including one from Afghanistan, to ram a vehicle laden with explosives into the local Christmas market. 5 years before that, in 2017, 6 Syrian nationals, including asylum seekers, who had been in contact with ISIS, were arrested on suspicion of planning an attack on the Christmas market. The year before, in Berlin, a terrorist in a tractor trailer drove through the Christmas market, killing 12 and injuring 56. And we've certainly had our own terrorist attacks, Muslim terrorist attacks, here in the United States. But these are tolerated.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry,
And it's all driven by leftist policies. You have to, I don't know how you could not believe that these people are treasonous, that are allowing these wide open borders, let people into the country. First of all, they're illegally coming into the country is breaking the law in and of itself. That's bad enough. But to allow people into your country who are culturally unassimilatable, they're unassimilable, however I pronounce that, is an absolute recipe for disaster. You're allowing a culture to come into the country that simply is not assimilatable. They don't believe in freedom in the way that we think of freedom. They don't believe that women should have the right to vote or the right to work or to do anything else. Not to mention the fact that the right to have freedom of speech and freedom of different belief systems. I mean, imagine this for a moment. If you invited a guest in your house, and that guest came to your house and said, "I don't like your furniture. I'm changing your furniture. I'm changing the food you eat. I'm changing how you cook. I'm changing the way you dress. Oh, by the way, your wife needs to have like bag over her head." All of that stuff. You know, would you have some issues with that? You probably would. Well, that's the same thing that's happened here. We've thrown our borders wide open. You would think that these people would be just completely thankful. You're living in a place where you can turn on a faucet and water comes out of the faucet. You can go to the bathroom and the bathroom has a toilet in it that actually works. You can get in a car and drive down the street and people will stop at the stop sign. You can walk across the road. You can go to the grocery store, it's full of food. These are all things that people don't have in their countries, yet they come here. We've rolled out the carpet for them, and then they come and destroy your house. Why? Who would put up with that? Only a crazy liberal would put up with that.
Well, and they don't want to put up with it when they have to live under those same conditions. They're not interested. They live behind gates. They have security personnel. They have weapons. They have all of the things, and they have plenty of money, so they don't have to put their kids in the public school. They don't have to eat, at the same level restaurants that we do. They're not affected by the affordability crisis. They have crazy, congressional healthcare benefits and retirement benefits. They're in a bubble.
And see, that's where I have to think that there's a strategic element to this, because there's no way the people at the top of the food chain, not talking about your crazy aunt in the street running around with blue hair, nose bone through her nose, tattoos all over her neck. I'm not talking about her, but these people, these elitists that work at these large companies, make all this money, live in let's face it, the Palo Altos and the Burlingames and the Rancho Palos Verdes and and the Bellevues, Lake Oswego's, Council Crest. We all know, if you're on the East Coast listening to this, sorry, I just named a bunch of West Coast places. Don't know the East Coast that well. South Philly, I'll throw that out there, right? But those people that live in those places don't have to deal with the ramifications of what they're putting on everyone else. So when let these illegals come in the country and basically burn the neighborhoods down, they're not burning down those neighborhoods. The neighborhoods they're releasing them into are the southeast Portland, the South Seattle, the South Central Los Angeles, the Oakland, MacArthur Boulevard, right? Those are the people who are having to pay the price so that they can like be liberal posers and virtue signal. And I think eventually people are going to and are getting tired of paying the price for their virtual signaling. I'd love a law that gets passed. You're going to let illegals, if you're going to let immigrants into the country, then there's certain zip codes they have to go to. And they have to go to Palo Alto. They have to go to Palos Verdes. They have to go to, you're going to let them in. You let them be your neighbors and see how you deal with that when they're wrecking your schools and wrecking your healthcare system and raping up your daughters and carjacking you. Then you might think differently.
Here, here. I have nothing to debate on that. I
Oh,
agree with you totally. I mean,
yeah.
look what happened when they dropped him into Martha's Vineyard. How long did that
Well,
last? 24 hours?
they had him out of there so fast before you could say Bob's your uncle. They were gone.
Yeah,
Gone, gone.
yeah, yeah. And then I guess if that doesn't work, they just burn your whole town down, like they
Oh
did
yeah.
in LA. And then
And,
they
you know,
rezone it to affordable.
and the related article, and I have to say this because it does make me feel good to say this, but I'm going to beat up the churches, Western churches in general, for this. You get these statements from the leadership of these churches who are constantly bashing the administration for quote unquote maltreatment of illegal immigrants, and they're basically lying in what they're saying in the press. They're saying things like we should put a stop to masked men kicking down the doors and dragging illegals out of beds. You and I know good and well that's not what's happening, but that's how they're posing it. But the other side of this is, why aren't they worried? I'm talking about these churches now. I'll put my finger in their chest. Why aren't they worried about the people that live in these neighborhoods who can't walk outside? Citizens, by the way. Why aren't they worried about Native American citizens who can't use their public school system, who can't get to the line in the grocery store, who can't get a job because the illegals have flooded the market and made the wage rate so low because they flooded the market? Why aren't they supporting those citizens who can't rent apartments, those young Americans who can't get an apartment because the market's flooded with illegals and driven the rents through the roof? Same thing with buying a new house. Where are they in terms of defending them when their children get beat up in the streets and daughters get raped? There is like not a finger lifted for them. And it just amazes me that this so-called church leadership, continues to do that. And I strongly suspect, and this is the ugly truth, because a large percentage of them are getting money before Doge came along, we're getting funded to basically be what do you call it? Is the GMO, an extension of the
Yeah.
government, NGO, an NGO for the government.
But GMO is also bad, but
Yeah, that too. But they get funding that they can so-called turn around and use to help the poor. And what
yeah,
percentage of that gets skimmed off for administration?
yeah,
So, it's an ugly thing, but you just got to call them like you see them.
yeah,
Where are they to support the Native Americans? Because here's the thing: at the end of the day, you can't help somebody else in their house if your own house is wrecked. I mean, how can I help the person who's in really bad? How can I help my brother? We'll say, who's living in the gutter if my house is destroyed? And the reality is, what we should be doing is helping those people, helping the countries those people come from to be better countries, so they don't have to leave and come here. Um, that's what the focus should be. We should be doing things to help uh, Mexico's best citizens leave and come here, legal or otherwise. The ones who want to work, the ones who are productive. Of course, there's a bunch of ne'er-do-wells in that pot. But the bottom line is, who could blame them? But the reality is, we should be doing everything to help them stay in their own countries so they could force that government to behave. And as a result, we wind up subsidizing a really bad government. And that's precisely what we're doing, because how much of that money goes back to Mexico? We know it's a fortune.
yeah. I would be in favor of just hands off, and not necessarily like an isolationist sort of
Mhm.
mentality, but I really feel like if we weren't picking up the garbage for Mexico and buying their drugs, that they would be forced to actually fix their schools, fix their roads, provide a working economy, have law enforcement that did their job. I mean, they can just run ragged over everything because we take their lowest skilled and their poorest members of society. They keep the doctors, they keep the business owners,
right? Mm-hmm.
They keep those people, right? And they throw us, all of the lower level folks, and then we're of course stuck, and then they send all their money back to Mexico.
Yeah, we foot the bill, and then they send the money back to Mexico, and then they have the audacity to tax it.
Right. Yeah, they tax it on the come in, and we just let it go out, and and they're sending over, our health. I mean, our tax dollars.
Yeah, it is, and they're obviously not the only country. They're just one of the biggest ones.
Yeah.
And the solution really is to just stop it, to build a giant wall, throw everybody out that's here illegally, and make them come in the front door rather than the back door, like everyone else has done.
Yeah.
You look at the immigration we had back in Ellis Island so that'd be the 20th century, beginning of the 20th century, and those people were screened. Not everybody came in. Not everybody who came got in the door. You couldn't come here bringing a bunch of diseases. You had to be able to show that you were going to work and be healthy and be a contributor to society. There was no welfare, so it wasn't like you were going to get on that, right? You came here because, this is the other thing, you wanted to become an American citizen. That doesn't mean you threw your culture away, but it does mean you wanted to become an American citizen. We got people coming here who want to run around with their flag in the street and then burn the American flag, in the street. Why in the world would we let somebody come into our country who hates our country? That's insane. That's a suicidal thing. Mm-hmm. And the only thing that holds our society together, in this case, is the adhesion to the core principles that are set forth in the Constitution.
Yeah.
And if these people don't know it, don't care about it, and they hate it, it's not like we all look the same. It's not like we're different race, color, creed. You and I look different, right? But we believe in the same principles, and that's what binds us together. What makes us unique from any other country on earth. So we're like Japan. You got to be Japanese to be in Japan. You got to be Japanese to be a citizen. That's how it is. You can be French to be a Frenchman. We're the only place in the world that's like this, and if we allow this to go on, we're going to destroy the very thing that made this country great in the first place.
Yeah. Well, that's the goal. That's certainly their goal. I was wondering, so are you gonna kind of pivot a little bit, or maybe lean in a little bit further to, some of what these the Catholic leaders are talking about and how they're calling out? I don't know. We had a quick conversation about how some of these Catholic leaders were calling out the Trump and the United States for their immigration policies, and a reporter asked Tom Homan about it, and he just. I think he had a cup of coffee in his hand, and like a little white cup, and he was just standing there, casual. Give me your questions. And they threw that at him, like, what do you think of all these faith leaders calling out the Trump administration and ICE and all these things? And he was just like, I don't really know what to tell you. I mean, the Vatican City has a big old wall, like,
right?
You can't get in there, without being invited, or you got to follow the rules. I mean, and he just blew it off. I mean, it was just such common sense, this whole, gyration that people feel like they need to do of, I don't know, validating people's stupid questions. I just love it when they just say, next, did you hear that come out of your mouth? No, next.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's a class, and I saw that, and I read one of the articles about that topic and these archbishops and making these statements, and the reality is that looking to feelings instead of looking to the objective reality of what's possible to work. And every country in the world has a right to defend its own borders, and I'm pretty certain that was that's part of it. I think it was the Pope, one of the popes pretty much said that every country has a right to defend its own borders. That's precisely what we're saying here. You have to have rule of law, like you just mentioned a moment ago. And I think Homan said this. You don't see the Vatican open the doors so everybody can just come in. They're not doing that.
I mean, think about it. You can't even get to all of the Sistine Chapel. You can't get to I can't use whatever bathroom I want. I mean, there's ropes, there's rules, there's signs blocking doors, I mean, for goodness sakes.
Yeah, no, it's common sense, and it's common sense that no country can have open borders and still be a country, and we can only support just like in a household, you can only have so many people come into your house that you could, even if you wanted to, that you could take care of. And I've even talked about that's just the fiscal side of things. We haven't even talked about the behavioral side of things. If you have too many people in your country, in your house, whatever it is, that don't adhere to the same moral code as you do, it won't work. It'd be as if maybe you had a nephew who came to live with you, and this nephew and you had two or three other kids in the house. And this nephew's getting up in the mornings, watching porn, laying on the couch all day. He won't pay for his own food, eating all your food, right? Staying out super late, coming home drunk. That's not going to work for you. And you should, not only do you have a right, you have a duty to put that person out. Now, that same thing I just said applies to an entire country as well. There's a certain percentage of the population that you can handle doing that. And once you reach a tipping point, that won't work anymore. It's just like, bless you, like we laugh about, I can't remember the town in Ohio where they were eating the cats and dogs, right?
Yeah.
On the surface, that was pretty funny for all of us, right? But the reality is, it really was a great illustration of what happens when you bring people in from a culture that's radically different from the Western culture of the United States. And yes, you bring in 40,000 people from, I think it was Haiti, in a city that only has 100,000 people. I think it was roughly something like that.
Yeah.
You're going to have issues because we're talking cultures where, and I've been to some of these countries around the world where, you don't put garbage in garbage cans. You just put it down wherever it is. You just throw the garbage on the ground, right? That's just not part of the culture. There's countries, and I'm sure you've seen these things about India, for example. People go to the bathroom outside. It's just wherever they are, they go to the bathroom. You got to go. When you got to go, right? And we all laugh about this, but try to get your arms around that or your head around what that looks like. Now, some of you out there may be seeing the movie Slumdog Millionaire. If you haven't, you should. Have you seen that, Leslie?
You know what? I haven't. I avoided it because I knew that it was violent, and I just
it's not totally. It has
I got this.
It has some violence in it, but it's not totally violent. And I won't get into the story as much as, and I had my kids watch so they could see what life is like in other parts of the world. When you see the complete abject poverty and the things that you 100% take for granted in this country. We take for granted, for example, that you turn on the water comes out. You think that's like normal? You think that's everywhere? You want hot and cold water, you turn on, you get hot. We get mad because you got to wait 5 minutes because our hot water tank is downstairs. You got to wait for the water to get upstairs. We're all mad because it took 5 minutes to wait for the water. Are you kidding me? Talk about a first world problem, right? We take for granted people are going to drive on the right side of the street, that you can cross the crosswalk and somebody's going to stop for you while you finish crossing the crosswalk. We take for granted you go to the grocery store and you get a shopping cart and it's not going to be filled with garbage. These are little things, right? Shopping carts filled with, but you go to some of these cities in these blue locations, you try to get a shopping cart, the thing is so filthy, you got to have a hose to wipe it down. The thing is filled with garbage. These little behavioral things that you learn when you've been westernized. You get them from your family growing up. Just what we would call common courtesy ain't so common because that's a part of the culture that you grow up with, and you get that from birth. And it takes 18 years to develop that. Some people never get it fully, obviously, but it takes 18 years to create a human being, an adult, a civilized person. And you go to other cultures that don't have that same standard, you can't flip that switch overnight. And if there's too many of them, you're not flipping it at all because they're going to live in the same enclaves and then keep doing the same old thing over and over again. Not to mention the fact, and I'm sure you might have heard of this recently, it's finally getting some press, is that these people who are very tribal wind up intermarrying to such a degree that you have this cousin-on-cousin marriage, and now you have these outrageous rates of birth defects, which you'll see more and more press on this happening. That's a real problem in Great Britain with a lot of these immigrants that come over. They're seeing diseases that they only read about in medical school because when you have generations of first cousins marrying each other, you start having these massive rates of birth defects. So there's a zillion reasons why it's a bad idea to open up your borders to pretty much anyone, particularly people who come from countries that are in effect are non-Western. It's
Yeah.
awfully this. And the one blessing we have is we got two oceans that make it harder for that to happen here. Whatever the immigration is from Mexico, yeah, it's too much, but at least culturally we don't face that.
Right.
But Europe's getting destroyed by it.
Well, but I think that we have a lot of those. We
Mm.
have those numbers of immigrants. We just have such a big country that they're all spread out.
Yeah, we don't have the concentration yet that they have there. And that's not, I'm not saying we shouldn't be worried about it. We should. But I'm just saying it's happening faster there because they're just like two things. One, their politicians just letting them in. And two, just like you said, the spaces are tighter. I mean, look, Texas is the same size as France, which gives you an idea just how large the United States is. We take it for granted because we're just used to it. But this country is huge.
Mhm.
Um, and uh, and so they got to deal with that in tighter spaces. You go to a place like Paris. If Paris was an American city, it'd be what? I think the only city in the United States as big as Paris is New York, right? It's huge, and then they're all there.
Yeah, by people. Yeah, and they don't all wear deodorant. So
Well, those are the other, maybe not so, maybe less minor to a man than a woman. Admittedly,
I don't
my,
know.
well,
It's
my
it's
boys
a
did.
sneaky
My
secret.
boys didn't become convinced of the value of a shower until they started noticing girls at about 15. Then suddenly it was 2 showers a day,
Right, right, right.
3 showers. You taking another shower?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, who is she?
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. That's so funny. Hey, I speaking about foreign countries, the Epstein Island stuff
Oh,
coming out, and I'm so interested to follow these prosecutions that, or at least the investigations that are going on with Larry Summers and the Clintons, and all these, and Larry Summers stepped aside from Harvard, and I guess he was on faculty there. He was the president for a while, and was it who was it? Was it Elizabeth Warren? Somebody sent like a scathing email to
mhm.
Harvard, I mean, a Dem, like a powerful Dem against Summers, encouraging them to, cut him off from absolutely everything, and they did, or maybe he stepped aside. But I just love the game. I love the game that Trump plays, where he'll play so coy, and,
Oh,
and people don't get it. Well, Trump just said that, he's gonna, collect 100% in income taxes. And people are, can you believe he would have said that? And then they go down a rabbit hole of like, can he do that? Oh, that's terrible. And this and that. And it's like, he's just yanking your chain. Like you don't get it. You don't get it. So this whole cat and mouse game that he played with,
mhm.
and that he's got his whole team doing, it's really impressive. I mean, this whole there's no there with the Epstein files, and the next thing the Dems are demanding that the whole entire file be released. And oh, okay, well, okay, I guess you twisted my arm. They jumping docks and
Yeah.
some
And
things.
now they're going to be the ones on the defensive because who do you think's in there? Surprise, surprise, right? It is absolutely amazing. I think one of the most refreshing things about this administration to me, a lot of people, their biggest issue with Trump is his form and how crude and rude he is and that sort of thing. But you know what? From the beginning, I've been one of those quiet people who loves it because I am so tired of Republican candidates who are so namby-pamby, always crying and whining and asking for forgiveness and being afraid to fight. I mean, McCain didn't run a campaign at all. Dole didn't do a thing. I mean, these guys were so tired. Don't even tell me about that guy in Utah, right? They were a joke. So to finally have somebody who's willing to go street on these people, which is the only thing they understand, right?
Yeah, yeah,
He's willing to go like neighborhood street brawler. You hit me, I'm hitting you back harder. That's the one thing. And the other thing is they've always been in control of the narrative. You notice they never can get a narrative going because he's got 7 or 8 things going on at the same time. So it's very hard to hit a moving target. And every time you turn around, you know, they have nothing to hit. It's like fighting a boxer who's like got great defensive skills. You just can't land a punch. Um, and it's a wonderful thing to watch.
Yeah, it is. And it's only working because he's got his team around him. He's put in the work. They've got the plan and they're running. They are running the plays, like you said, in multiple directions. So, nobody can keep up.
Well, and I think part of that was he went and got people who were not part of the swamp. I mean, he went and selected people that the swamp tried to kill. I mean, you look at a number of them were Democrats that flipped to Republicans because their own party tried to get them. What did much call it? So Kennedy's a classic example of that. And here's a guy, the Kennedy clan. You can't get any more Democrat royalty than that. And they kicked him out. Why? Because he wouldn't toe the party line. So when you go get people like that, they're going to be loyal. And his first go round, he had nothing but backstabbers on his team. Now he learned from that first time around. You got to go get people who are on your team, who are loyal, who are not part of the swamp, who are willing to put America first and not their next job or their next career or their next, trade on the stock market. And that's what he has. Why else would you take a role where you're going to catch this much flack? I mean, I think you saw that article not that long ago where a number of them have moved into a housing situation behind gates.
Yeah.
Because their lives are at risk.
They're moving on a basis. Yeah.
Yeah. So why would you do that? And these people all are fine financially. They don't have to do this, which tells me they're doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
So anyways, yeah.
Yeah, I get it. Well, but one of the people that surprises me that she doesn't understand Trump's move is Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, she's in a way she's like Trump. I mean, she's less strategic, but things tumble out of her mouth. She's been mischaracterized. She's been villainized, made fun of, right? I mean, everything she's put up with. And she's smart. She's a business owner. She's come from a strong family background. She's a Christian. I mean, there's a lot of things to really love about her. She tells you exactly what she's thinking and exactly what she's going to do. She doesn't get off the narrative. She's like, I'm here for this. I'm here for and she's going after Trump. Mm-hmm. And I just don't understand it. I don't get why. I don't know when people lose the plot.
Yeah, I don't know I'm not even going to pretend to know the motivations or even take a stab at them. I've not followed her closely enough to really make an educated guess around that. I'm like you. I've been impressed with her, though, in terms of her willingness to stand out there and catch arrows. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that on our side of the fence is we have to recognize is we don't have to have everybody 100% lockstep on our side. You can criticize and not be kicked off the farm. Unlike on the Democrat side, you make a critique there, they're done with you. They hate your guts. Like you look at the attacks they're doing on Fetterman, for example. So I don't think we can afford to look like them, and that's going to be okay if some people. I don't get the logic of it, but
I think there's plenty of Republicans that do that too. I mean, it's human nature, but. The Dems have not always, but the Dems have very, very recently for a while been very good about linking arms and just carrying the message. And it's like, we're all doing this. We're all showing up and we're presenting a united front. Mm-hmm. And then whatever scuffles they have to work through, they do it in the back. They do it in the back of the house. Nobody sees that. And Republicans are out there slinging arrows at each other. And we're still doing that. I mean, I'm on a text thread. There's about 13 people on this text thread, and I'm on a couple of them where this has happened, where somebody will post something, can you believe Tucker Carlson, la la la, or can you believe Candace Owens or Megyn Kelly or this or that or whatever, and it's like, why are you spending time going after Republicans? You don't like that. Mm-hmm. You don't really need to like most of them, but when they show up, are they voting in the right way? Are they crafting the right bills? Are they willing to fight for you? Like you, I could care less. Maybe like on a personal level, I care how somebody presents themselves and comports themselves with a colleague, with a friend, obviously, right? With family. But when it comes to the cage fight called politics,
Mhm.
I don't expect you to be refined. I really want you to be out there pulling some hair and flinging some mud. Like that's what you need to do. Unfortunately, being nice just doesn't work. So, when you're out there doing all that, you're going to say things that people don't like and maybe you would take it back if you were thinking about it more, but you're just in it.
Sure.
So I have no tolerance for any sort of, I don't know, any sort of speculation or debate about doing that purity test on other Republicans. Like, just shut up and like get in the freaking game. I don't care what your haircut looks like. I don't care what you had for dinner last night. I don't care what songs you like to listen to. Fight next to me. Let's get it done.
Right. Yes. Yes. And I had a list. It looks like it didn't print out. I was just go through all of the accomplishments. So you have these people who are like taking pot shots at Trump because there's some little thing they disagree with. Right. Let me see if I can't find this real quick. Just the accomplishments that have happened over the last. Howard it hasn't even been a year yet. So here we go. So people are so hung up on this little thing they have here or that little thing that isn't going exactly the way they want it. Like I think one of the latest brouhahas was over the HB1C,
H-1B visas.
right, that whole visa thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Which
But
Trump has nothing to do with. He didn't start that program.
no, exactly. Yeah. But so just a few of the things like ending DEI, getting the military back to being military, all the things that have happened with Kennedy and getting the health agency squared away, pardoning the January 6th folks, shutting down USAID, arresting all these deep staters, firing bureaucrats, fixing inflation. The list goes, not to mention shutting the border down and getting that squared away. It's unbelievable. It's hard to remember how many has he stopped 8 different wars, deporting illegals, getting manufacturing coming back into the country. I mean, the list is absolutely, who can hardly keep track of it? I should keep a running tally somewhere. So it's so easy to forget that stuff. And we haven't even gotten through the first year. And you have to also remember that how many years did Biden have flooding the border? 4 years in a row? And really it was more before that. But he really opened it when he got in office, just flooded the border. Letting 10, 15 million people conservatively? You're not going to flip a switch and have that reversed overnight. It's much easier to destroy than it is to build. Similarly, you think about the cost of housing, for example, right now. Well, let's say we removed 10 million illegals today, right now. Well, housing prices wouldn't drop overnight. It takes time for that to work through the system. If you're a landlord, for example, and you got a 30-unit place and 10 units are filled with illegal Somalis and suddenly 10 units are empty, you're going to have it on the market for a few more months and you're going to see you can't get the rent you got before. And maybe 2 or 3 months down the road, you figure you have to lower the rent in order to get, right? That's how things work. They take time. Same with the housing market, right? So even if you were able to push a button and get rid of 15 million people today, you're not going to see the impact of that for at least 3, 4, 5 months. So he put these things, literally just started putting these policies in place in the last few months. You got to give it at least X number of months before you see an impact. And we are in a lot of ways already.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in the process of, trying to buy a house and I'm looking around going, I can't believe this, but I don't blame Trump for it. I blame.
Part of your problem is you're in California on top of that. So you got a liberal state, which is going to blunt anything that he's done to a certain extent.
Of course. Yeah. But the affordability issue is a thing. And I'm really glad that I have some protection in that I'm employed. I have employer healthcare benefits. So that's protecting me for my costs, right? But it's the economy needs to be fixed, and but I trust that he's working on it. I do trust that he's working on it, and however he goes about it, I think it's going to be strategic and
some of this is just it's fundamentals. I mean, and a lot of people. So the average Joe doesn't think about how things work. All they think about is When I go to the store, do things cost more or less? They don't think about how that came to be that way. So there's maybe 20% of the population willing to go through the work to do that. So you can assess whether what this guy's doing is going to lead to something. So, for example, if I stand up atop a building and I throw a rock, um, you know, every time rocks have been thrown off buildings in history, they've fallen. So we know if you throw a rock off a building, it's going to fall. We also know, from an economics perspective, that if you increase the supply of something, then the price of something of that something will go down. If you decrease the supply of it, then the price of it will go up. This is the reality of how things work. So what the Biden administration did was they let in a zillion people, which means that wages must go down because there's an oversupply of employees. Therefore, if I reverse that by kicking them out, wages will go up. Now, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but that is a natural law, just like throwing a rock off a building. Um, and that's what we're faced with. You know, the same is true of inflation. If you go out there and run up and borrow a bunch of money, print out a bunch of dollars, what's going to happen? As sure as night follows day, prices are going to rise. And that's precisely what we see happening. Or that's happened because of the last administration. The solution is to stop doing those things. And over time, we will get the result. But you have to be relatively patient. The farmer doesn't plant a seed in the ground and then get mad 2 days later because the plant didn't come up. You go dig it up, I'll throw it away. That seed's no good. No, you got to give the seed a chance to germinate, right? And that's where we are. We're in the germination phase. It's just like when Reagan got elected, that destructive administration, we call the Carter administration. We all remember what was pain. It was it was, what was it, what's a recession is when you lose your job. A recession is when your neighbor loses their job. A depression is when you lose your job. And then a recovery is when Jimmy Carter loses his job. One of the greatest Reagan quips ever. But that didn't happen overnight. It took 4 or 5 years to recover from that, that disastrous stretch. And when it did, we had a 10 or 15 year economic boom as a result of the policies Reagan put in place. I don't think it's going to take as long here because we're not going to be able to get rid of 15 million people. We can certainly get rid of a whole pack, and he already has done that. And the whole tariff thing has brought a ton of manufacturing back to the country, which you got to give them time to build the factories, sports fans, right? You're not going to flip the switch. It doesn't happen overnight, but that's happening, and it's going to result in young people getting jobs. They're going to get real incomes at the same time as the cost of housing goes down because we kicked out these illegals. They'll be able to acquire their first houses. You think about the ridiculousness of this. I'm in the middle of this because I have a kid in the process of buying his first house. Up here in the Northwest, near Portland, it takes a minimum of 400,000, maybe closer to 500,000 to buy a house. 450 to 500 bucks, you might call a starter home, maybe 15 to 1,800 feet, not where you're hearing gunfire at night, right? Which rules out Portland. Just kidding. So the average income, I believe, in this state is around 70 for a household. So 70 goes into 450, 7 times 8 is 7. So that's 6 times earnings, roughly, right? When my parents bought their first house, I saw some economic data on this. It was in the United States, it was 1.5 times earning. So if you earn $8,000 a year in 1960, then a house costs you like $12,000, right? And about somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 times earnings historically what it's been, which is reasonable. So if you think to yourself, if you're earning $100,000 and you live in LA, you should be buying the first house for $300K. Now you probably laugh when you talk about $300,000. Where in the hell are you finding a house for $300,000 in California? Probably on the Salton Sea. And that's because of what the state has done and the government. They've reduced the supply of housing with all these crazy environmental regulations. So now builders can't build because there's a limitation in the amount of space and all the hoops you have to jump through. So you have reduced supply. At the same time, you've increased demand by opening the borders up. So every Tom, Dick, and Harry can come here, right? So you've got both of those things operating at the same time. So what the administration is doing is they're reducing the regulations, which increases the supply, kicking the illegals out, which reduces the demand, which will bring down the price over time. And you have to give it time.
Yeah, I mean the housing supply for homes is for from a lot of these corporate buyers, people who to buy a house in my old neighborhood, the average price was about $1.5 million. These were tract homes. These were
Mhm.
tract homes. So that's not somebody coming across the border working for nothing, right? These are they're saying that most of the homes that are owned out there now, or at least a very very significant portion, are owned by these corporate entities that are just buying up single family residences and then
Mhm.
turning them into rentals. And so here we are, trying to buy, and like you said, the supply is depleted. Um, but another problem is that you have all the not just the regulations, but you have all the fees. So of course, the builder has to recoup a higher level of dollars before if they want to keep that same delta, or at least something similar to buying and selling a home back in Mississippi. They've got to have anyway, it's sad, and I
Yeah.
wish it went this way. And at some point, it will go back because we can't keep going like this. I,
No.
we're like hanging on the edge of the cliff. The,
Mhm.
the the idea that we have any more money that we can hand out. I mean, one of the things that I am so excited about is the fact that the administration is supposedly requiring everybody to reapply for their SNAP benefits, for
Mhm.
food stamps. And so that's going to eliminate a lot of people because a lot of those people are dead. They live outside the country. They shouldn't qualify because they've got more than enough money. They don't actually qualify anymore. They just never dropped off. So that's going to be kind of a natural and I think easy first level culling. And then we'll start getting into people who are like clever enough to falsify records, and people who maybe they are poor but they've not actually looked for a job in a generation. So maybe those with Trump requiring that you check in and provide proof that you've been looking for a job. And
Mhm.
um,
Well, the level of waste, fraud, and abuse in that system is so incredible that it, that is like beyond belief. And for the regular Joe who works a regular middle class, job, works, goes home, raises their family, if you've not been around the folks who work that system, you really have no idea how well they work that system.
yeah,
Um, they know every single rule there and every get around that you could possibly know. This reminds me of a story. Sometimes these anecdotal stories are the best way to kind of illustrate a point. So when I lived in North Long Beach, it's where I bought my first house, right where the Artesian Freeway makes the 710. For those of you who know the area, right? And there was a Burmese guy who owned a gas station. I go there and fill up gas before I go make my sales calls today. And every day there was this tall black guy, handsome, good looking, about 6'4", and he'd like want to wash your windows, right? And so I like strike up a conversation with this guy all the time. And he and his guys just telling me, he's like, I was like, and at that time I think it was Governor Pete Wilson. And everybody, you got $400 walking around money when Wilson was governor. I don't know if you remember that. We call it walking around money. And I was like, and the Burmese guy was like, in this broken accent, I don't understand Americans. I don't get it. Why don't they work? Work, job. Why don't that boy get a job? Job. I don't get it. Get out of here. Why you job? Don't bother my customers. And I just be dying laughing as I watched this exchange. So I'm talking to the guy one time. I was like, so man, why are you doing this? He said, be crazy to work. You know, I get $400 from the government. I get $400. These call him Pete. I get $400 from Pete. I got a couple of checks over here and there talking about the welfare system, right? We added it all up. He was doing about 2,000 a month just on these benefits. And you got a sugar lady to to take care of the other things, right? And then you start doing the math on this one. And I actually did this math. In those days, guys would stand in the intersection, the left turn signals, these big intersections in LA, and they would beg for money. You see this in these large cities. And I think it was like 2 minutes before the lights change, and there'd be five cars. Well, if I can get $5 per car, let's make it even $1 a car. So I'm getting $5 every 2 minutes, right? So what's that? Five times 30, that's $150 an hour. You start running the math on this, tax free. So these people are making a fortune doing that. and I saw this article in Wall Street Journal about that same time period. It was hilarious. They were interviewing these guys who worked at a Kentucky Fried Chicken in like central New York, and these guys would change out of their uniform at lunchtime, go get on the corner, and then like if it's not there and beg for money in at the intersection, and they make more doing that than they did a day working at the fast food place. So the average middle class Joe doesn't understand how the underground economy works, and no clue.
You're right. You're absolutely right, and it seems so shameful. I mean,
it is to you.
And
You just have to get over that shame thing. Once you get over that shame thing, lots of things become possible.
yeah, right. But it's the lying part too. That like,
Well, clearly you have to get over that. That is a middle class construct.
oh
That's
my
that's a Christian
God,
construct. You have
right.
to like put that behind you. Every politician's gotten past that. Come on now, Leslie. That's like third grade.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, we laugh. I say this in jest, but the reality is it's true. And like a dog that bites. Once he bites, he's used to biting. He'll keep on biting, right? Lions don't eat people, but once they do, they keep going back. So it's like any sinful thing you do, you can get accustomed to doing that. It doesn't bother you anymore. And it's so hard, I think, for the regular middle class mind to get their arms around that we have a cadre of people who are comfortable living that way. I'll tell you another quick story because I think these anecdotes are great. So I have my mother's cousins when I lived in Los Angeles. So these guys are all like 30 years older than me. But I knew them growing up, and they were old enough to be like in their early mid 20s in the late 60s. So think about when the Watts riots happened back then. And they said that was when the government first started the whole welfare program thing. Think of the Johnson administration. This is LBJ. He said they had people going in the neighborhood, knocking on doors to get you to sign you up for welfare. In other words, they were selling welfare in black neighborhoods on purpose. And he said, in those days, families still had pride, and the last thing you were going to be is, and they ran the guy off with a stick. They ran him off. None of my cousins were having any parts of being on somebody's welfare dime, right? This was whether you had a job. It didn't matter whether you had a job or not. They just wanted to get you on the dole so they could buy that vote. And one thing Johnson taught the Democratic Party was that works. He said, "I'll have them voting Democrat for the next 100 years," and he's half right because 50 years have gone by and it's been really successful. So that's the motivation. I don't know how we got to that subject, but that's where we are. And I know how. That's why they love illegal immigration.
Yeah.
They can vote by themselves in the office permanently.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, something that you talk about like reducing the population by escorting illegals across the border or back to their home country. I don't know if you saw that article about the study that just came out, sort of confirming that the spike protein, the presence of the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein, is actually responsible for a huge number of terrible, terrible side effects. I mean, and this was a study that didn't mention the vaccine, didn't mention anything controversial. They just but they specifically called out they were studying long COVID. And I feel like I need to lean in and whisper, but I am not vaccinated.
Me neither.
But and I was working in the clinical research field when all of this was going on, and I was looking around like, you guys design studies, like you design patient consent forms, like what a PCR test does and doesn't, like what I felt like I was on another planet. But anyway, I did have COVID, and I started to have some of the symptoms that people started calling long COVID. And so a while there, probably a year and a half, when I was like, sure, I didn't know how else to explain it. I had been vaccinated. And so I knew that I didn't have all that stuff, but anyway, I guess now they're starting to treat long COVID as actually the long vax injury. doesn't explain people like me who never got the vax, but you know, at least having in a published, peer-reviewed, published scientific journal, a study that is claiming, rightfully so, that the spike protein is creating all sorts of serious, serious health effects. We are going to find, I really think that we are going to find as we go on, say the next decade, that large portions of our population within a certain age group are just not surviving, or they're incredibly sick.
Well, we're already seeing that data from insurance claims. Like already, there's no explanation for it. Like the number of working age people who are now disabled is unexplainable by anything other than the vax.
But because we have such a big country, and because we're all so busy, we're on our phones, we're on our computers, we're working, we're this, we're that, if you don't know somebody or a few people in your inner circle that have suffered this way, I mean, we all know people who have cancer, and it feels sudden. I mean, I had a colleague who was diagnosed with cancer, and that was in February, and by June she was gone.
Yeah. And
it was obviously very, very fast moving. It came out of nowhere. They had no explanation. Now, I have not once brought it up. Could it be because I feel like it would be just sort of throwing salt in the wound. But
that's the thing that makes this even more evil, because of what you just described. You can't really have a conversation with people about it unless they are far removed from that individual. But I agree with you 100%. I've never seen in my entire life, I've never that I'm either I know the person or they're one person removed from me with the amounts of cancers that have been popping up, and fast moving ones. And not only that, the same thing goes true for strokes and heart attacks. It's like off the charts. And people who I'm not talking about people who are 100 pounds overweight either. I'm talking people who are active, healthy, doing it's I don't need a clinical trial to tell me that something seriously is wrong, and it started in roughly the year 2021 when all of this stuff started happening. Correlation does not prove causation. Yes, that is true, but it's a damn good place to start. And then the same thing is true of vaccines other than the COVID vaccine. You look at the last 50 years, I look back when I was a kid, I didn't know anybody who had these conditions we're talking about now. Talking about things like being on the spectrum and OCD and, all of these other things that we're seeing. And now it's like hardly anybody doesn't know anybody who has a kid who has, what you call it, but is on the spectrum for
special needs in some ways, some neurological issues.
Yeah, you never saw that stuff. And the data supports that. It's like 25 or 30 times more than it was in, say, 1970.
Yeah.
So what has changed since then?
Well,
go ahead.
And when you talk about the drain that is on a family, psychologically, financially, the wealth that's not being created in our community, in our economy, because a parent has to stay home, or the family breaks up because they just can't handle the stress. And then of course you have a member of your society who is never going to be productive at the level that they really need to. Not going to go on and have a family. I mean, it's these things are not isolated incidents. They are all related.
And here's the evil of it when you begin to dig deeper. And this is the part that, again, the average middle class mind can't get their heads around, that someone would plan to do this, right? And some people, there's no way, that's impossible, conspiracy theory. But you know what? Somebody planned to assassinate Abraham Lincoln, his entire cabinet. Yes, they did that. Somebody planned to assassinate the Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife. And there's a whole group of people. Yeah, they did that. Somebody formed a group that planned to take over Germany and then murder 6 million Jews. Yeah, they did that. Somebody planned to take over the Soviet Union, create the Bolshevik Revolution, and then enslave the entire Eastern Europe. Yep, they did that. They're evil people walk amongst us. And the only difference between Jeffrey Dahmer, who only murders and eats people in his apartment, and somebody who does it to 60 million people is the person with 60 million people was probably had a higher IQ, which is always more dangerous, which takes us into the realm of religion. Who was the smartest and brightest of the angels?
Mm.
It always comes back, sports fans. It always comes back to morality. You cannot escape it. The king, the father of the lie.
Yeah.
That guy was not a dummy.
Yeah.
You know, I,
And
I
Luke,
would say
I
to you
think,
that Chairman Mao, Lenin, Stalin, all the great evil guys of all time, they were not dummies.
well, and they were also very dynamic. They were complete egomaniacs who believed in their ideas and their self, and they just, you and I, like, talk about shame. You and I would be ashamed. I would never go out and pretend. I don't know. I don't know.
See, shame is that's a very moral thing because you feel guilt for doing something wrong. These people are past that, way past that.
Yeah, yeah. I was reading that book, the real Anthony Fauci, that
Mhm.
Kennedy wrote, and it was so disturbing. I it's so disturbing, and like you said, I mean, Fauci was at it for a long, long, long time, and he looked at populations of children, in these third world countries as just his plaything, just a petri dish. He knew people would die. He knew that they would be sterilized. He didn't care.
It's just data. Like remember the whole thing with him and the puppies, right?
But it's data, but it's like it's useless. It's this sadism. There's nothing. We don't need to know that. We don't need to spray. We don't need to have another clinical trial that sprays bleaches into someone's eyes. Like, we've already got that information, and that's where I think AI is going to be so helpful with some of these things, because it's going to be able to replicate. I mean, we do some computerized models and some research, but there's just so much unnecessary drama and suffering everywhere. But in the clinical industry, that I don't mean drama, I mean trauma.
Mhm.
Emotional trauma that goes on. And
Yeah.
anyway,
Well, my friend, we have become beyond our allotted time.
definitely. We got to put those back in. Spit them out next week.
Yes. As they say, to be continued. Well, folks, thank you all so much for. Yeah, I hear you. That Fauci living on the spoils. Yeah, I'm not sure what he's living on. I got to say something polite here when I finish, so I won't spend the last thing on Fauci.
Look away, Don. Look away.
I won't say anything nice. So I want to say thank you all for joining us on another wonderful Wednesday. Leslie, what say you in closing thoughts or comments?
Thanks very much. I want to hear some more comments, though. I want people to contribute and bring up some topics that they want us to discuss, and that's what I would appreciate. I know that there's folks out there listening, and I'd like to have a conversation, not just talk at you.
I like it. Thank you so much. That was well said. So you all have a great evening. Really enjoyed it as always, and we'll talk to you next time.
All righty. Bye, all.
Good night. All right, you still there?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. So hey, that was great. Enjoyed a great comment at the end too. That was really a good thing to say, because yeah, we'd love to hear from more of these guys. But it's just crazy how fast that time goes by. I'm just like, that was really. I looked at my clock. I'm like, it was really an hour. And I had all this stuff. Didn't need to talk about it.
We'll do it next week.
Oh, by the way, I did talk to Maureen the other day,
Yeah.
and she's gonna hop on soon. I can't remember what she was telling me. A bunch of stuff's going on, but she's gonna be cool. So mid-December, early January, we'll get her in, and I'll reach out to Sunny too and see if we can't pull her into one of these. And
Okay. Cool.
we shall go over there.
Good. That'll be fun.
All right. Well, thanks once again. I've enjoyed it as always, and until next week.
All right. See ya.